The gentleman from West Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, the pending legislation, H.R. 6899, has as its additional co-sponsors the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gene Green, the gentleman from California, Mr. George Miller, and the gentleman from Michigan, the Dean of the House, Mr. John Dingell. My colleagues, today we stand at a crossroads, and the two paths before us are crystal clear. Those of us supporting the pending legislation bring us with us the new age conviction that in order for this nation to be truly secure, we must bridge the gap between our addiction to oil to a future empowered by more secure, safe, and reliable sources of power. That we must shatter the shackles of the past and remove the bonds that have placed such a burden on the American people and on our security as a nation. The other path is less enlightened. It carries with it the belief that a subservience to the policies of the past can sustain the country in the years and decades ahead. It would sacrifice America's energy security on the altar of big oil's profits and its profiteering. The choice is quite clear. Before us today is landmark legislation that would, for the first time since 1982, sweep away moratoria precluding oil and gas leasing in much of the federal waters off America's coastlines. As a result of the pending measure, roughly 85% of all oil in the outer continental shelf will be available for production. We are opening up to 400 million acres off the Atlantic and Pacific coasts to drilling. We are expanding the availability of oil by at least 2 billion barrels of oil, enough to power 1 million cars for 60 years. But in doing so, we have built-in safeguards. I repeat that. We have built-in safeguards. We do not undermine the defense posture of this country and the Defense Department's need to engage in military operations in America's waters. We protect national marine monuments and sanctuaries, provide for the consideration of the interests of the coastal, marine, and human environment. And importantly, we are cracking down on the incredible failure of the Interior Department to ensure Americans are getting paid a fair rate of return for the production of their, and I emphasize their, federal oil and gas reserves and resources. These reserves are not owned by Chevron or by Shell or by Exxon. They are owned by all Americans. They are owned by all Americans by birthright. Yesterday, another former Interior Department official who was in...
The gentleman will suspend until there's order in the chamber. Gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, another former Interior Department official who was in charge of collecting federal oil and gas royalties pleaded guilty to rigging bids. Last week, reports were released by the Interior Inspector General which found, I quote, a culture of ethical failure, end quote, in a division of the Minerals Management Service as part of what I believe to be a burgeoning scandal. This is the agency that is supposed to safeguard one of the largest non-IRS streams of revenue to the Treasury. It's almost like Teapot Dome all over again. At the same time, the Government Accountability Office reports were released which found that the United States receives one of the smallest shares of oil and gas revenue in the world. Think about that. We receive one of the smallest shares of federal oil and gas revenues of any country in the world. The reports also found that federal oil and gas leases are not being diligently developed. We are on this aisle and saying that for months. Production is only occurring on 12% of offshore leases and 5% of onshore leases. And as I have been bringing to light through a number of hearings held by our Natural Resources Committee, the Interior Department is unable to provide certainty that companies are paying the royalties owed to the American people. A culture of ethical failure indeed. The legislation before us contains bold initiatives to crack down on this legacy of abuse. It would require the diligent development of federal oil and gas leases, require that prompt, transparent, and accurate royalty payments are made, and would tackle the ethical failures occurring at the Interior Department. Leading the vanguard in our march to a more energy self-reliant and secure future is this legislation's establishment of a strategic energy efficiency and renewable reserve. This initiative would finance the development of renewable and alternative energy technologies, provide increased assistance for low-income home energy and weatherization programs, and advance carbon capture and storage, among other items. And we are dedicating over $6 billion to this fund over the next 10 years. All of the above. All of the above. How often have we heard that in this debate? All of the above. It is here, my friends. Oil, natural gas, oil shale, wind, solar, coal, energy efficiencies, and energy conservation. As I noted earlier, today we are at a crossroads. The difference is clear between those of us supporting this measure and some of those on the other side of the aisle who have been trumpeting their bumper sticker drill here, drill now approach to our serious energy situation. They would open up everything to big oil. Perhaps some of them would even open up the National Mall if they could to drilling rigs. They give away the store. No accountability, no safeguards, no expectation of a return in terms of energy or revenue. We on this side instead seek to protect America's interests in American resources. Make more federal oil and gas available to drilling. Yes, that's what we're doing in this bill. But we're doing so in a manner that safeguards our environment, ensures the diligent development of those energy resources, and demands that the American taxpayer gets a fair return. Royalties due, royalties paid. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.